Hello and welcome to another maths video by Maths with Sarah. So today we're going to be doing something slightly different, and we're going to be looking at some questions that come from a Key Stage 2 SATs maths paper. So this question, we're looking at two questions today. So we've got this percentage question, and then we've also got a question that involves fractions and decimals. And I always think that these are two topics that can quite easily catch children out. So I thought we'd have a look at them today. They both come from a non-calculator paper, so they're from the paper one, which is the one where they're not allowed to use a calculator. And I'm going to talk through, for both questions, there are a number of different ways that you can, different methods that you can use. And so I'm going to talk through a couple of methods that you could use to solve these questions. So let's get started. So this first question, we've got 20% of Megan's number is 64, and it wants us to work out what 50% of the number is. Okay, so again, there's multiple different ways that we can use to work this one out. I'm going to show you a couple of ways that I think are the easiest methods. They're both quite similar, but and it really doesn't matter what method you use, as long as you get the right answer at the end. It doesn't matter. There are many different ways of doing this question. Okay, so if we write down, we can write down that we know that we have got 20%, and that is equal to 64. Unfortunately, we haven't been told what the whole number is, because that would make it a lot easier for us to find 50%. But what we can do is do some maths with this one to work out a little bit of the number, and then we can figure it out from there what 50% is. So we should hopefully be able to work out what 10% is. So we know that 20% is 64. So what we can do is we can say, well, actually, if we're going to turn 20% into 10%, we can do that dividing by 2. So if we do 20% divided by 2, we end up with 10%. And so in actual fact, we can just do this on the other side. We can think of this a little bit like a set of scales. So if we've divided this side by 2, we also need to divide this side by 2. So we'll divide this by 2 now. So 64 divided by 2, the way that I think this is easiest to do, because both of these are even numbers and we're dividing by 2, we can do 4 divided by 2, which is 2, and 6 divided by 2, which is 3. So it won't necessarily always work like that, but for this case where we're just dividing by 2, then this is quite an easy method to do. So we've worked out what 10% is. We know that 10% is 32. If we wanted to, we could now go ahead and work out what 100% is. So in order to do that, we can do exactly the same as what we've done here. We can just say we'll times it by 10, because we know that 10 times 10 will give us 100, and that will tell us what 100% is. So if we do that, remember we need to do exactly the same on this side. So if we times by 10 on this side, we need to also times by 10 on this side. So that will turn this 32, which is 10% of our number, into 320, which is 100% of our number. So now, hopefully, you should be able to use this to work out what 50% is. So if we've got 50%, this one will be the answer to this question. So we've got 50%. Now, this is where there are a few different ways we can do it. We can either say, well, we know what 100% is, so let's divide that by 2, because we know that half, 50% is the same as a half, so we can divide this by 2. And we can then do the same here. We can divide this 320 and do that divided by 2. And if we do this, I'm going to have to write it out because it's a little bit more difficult to divide by 2 in my head. We can do, how many 2's are there, and how many 2's go into 3? Just 1, and then there's 1 left over. And then we can say how many 2's are there in 12? So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. That will be 6. And there aren't any left, there aren't any left over. We've got 2. How many 2's are there in 0? None. So 160 would be our answer here. The alternative way of doing this is, so at this stage, we can do each of these sides divided by 2 from 100%. Or we could have just gone from this step here. So rather than timesing by 10 to find 100%, we could just have said, well, actually, we can jump from 10% and work out what 50% is. And doing that, So we say to go from 10 to 50%, 10% to 50%, we need to do this times by 5. So we need to do exactly the same on this side. So remember, we've got this set of scales. Whatever we do to one side, we also need to do to the other side. So to work this one out, we then need to do 32 times by 5. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know that one in my head either. So let's draw a little grid. We'll do times by 5, and then we'll split 32 up into 30 and 2. So we can do 5 times 2, which gives us 10. 5 times by 30, so we'll ignore the 0 for now, take that off and put it back on later. We'll do 5 times by 3, and that gives us 15. And now we can add the 0 back on the end, so we get 150. And now if we add these two together, 150 plus 10 will give us 160. And look at that, using two different methods, either by finding 100% and then dividing it by 2 to get 50%, or by going straight from 10% times by 5 to get 50%. We've both got exactly the same answer using two different methods. So it just goes to show that there are multiple ways of doing this. If you found a different way, that's also fine. Like there are lots of different ways of doing that. And it also shows how we can play around with the percentages. So just because we might not know 20, we know 20%, we can then use that to very, very quickly and easily work out what 10%, what 100% and what 50% are. So hopefully this has shown you a different way of using percentages and a different ways of being able to work things out. Remember, we can always do this thing where we have a set of scales in the middle. As long as what we do to one side, we can times and divide as much as we like on one side, as long as we do exactly the same to the other side. So just remember that. This is a really good little percentage question. Lots of different bits of working out going on here. So hopefully you've understood you've followed exactly what I've done. If you want a few more questions like similar to this on percentages, then I've got a number of them being posted on my Twitter and my Instagram. So I suggest that you check those out to have a little extra practice at percentages. So using this method, if you struggle with those questions, then make sure you check back to this video and work out how to use your percentages. Okay, so I'm going to clear this off now, and we'll have a little look at the second question. So this is the second question that I've got for today. And this is the question where we've been given a few fractions and some decimals, and we've been asked to write them in order of the size from the smallest number to the biggest number. Now, this question is really quite a challenging question. So don't be surprised if you're looking at this thinking, I'm not quite sure how to do this, because I definitely think that there are a lot of people that will get stumped by this because of the fractions that we've got a mixture of fractions and decimals, and that's really quite nasty. So what we need to do is we need to either turn our fractions into decimals, or turn our decimals into fractions. So let's have a look and work out which method we think is going to work best. So we've got 2/3. Is that easy to turn into a decimal? Well, it's sort of one that you either have to know or you don't know really. So 1/3, so we know that 1/3, remember that if you convert this into a decimal, this is one that's just a little bit awkward, so you just got to remember it really. There's not really a way of working it out. 1/3 is the same as 0.33333333333333, carrying on and on and on. So we call that a recurring decimal, one that never stops. It's just going to keep going, 0.3333333333. So that's the same as 1/3, but instead of 1/3, we actually want 2/3. So 2/3, this fraction here, is the same as 0. I'm going to double this one because rather than having 1/3, we've got 2/3. So the same as 0.66666666666666, carrying on and on and on to another recurring decimal, which is going to keep going and keep going and keep going. Okay. So we've worked out 2/3 as a decimal. As I said, it's one of those you just sort of have to remember, which is a little bit annoying. 0.5 now. So 0.5, hopefully you remember that this is actually the same as a half. But if you don't remember that, then we can actually work it out. So if we think about which place value column this 5 comes in, it's in the tenths column. So I'm just going to draw a little tenth here. So that is the same as we've got 5 in the tenths column, which means that it's the same as 5/10. So we can write that as 5/10, a fraction 5/10. And you'll see that what we can do with fractions, you remember when we simplify fractions, we can find a factor that is common to both 5 and 10, so the numerator and the denominator. And so if we divide both of these by 5, what we're going to end up is 1/2. So either you can remember that, or if not, then you can always work it out. So we've got our second one here. We know that we've got 0.5 is the same as 1/2. Then let's have a look at the third one here. So we've got 3/5. It's a bit of an awkward one to put into a decimal, really. So the best way of turning fractions into decimals is to try and get the bottom number to equal either 10 or 100. So this denominator, if we can make this equal 10, then we've got it into tenths, and then we can do similar to what we did for 0.5 and put the 10, whatever's in our tenths, into the tenths column, and then we can convert that to a decimal. So similar to what we did for the percentages, we can manipulate this so that whatever we do we've got this this scales balance again in the middle. So we can times or divide the bottom number, or times and divide the top number. As long as we do the same to both, it doesn't matter how we multiply or divide. So what we've done here is we've done 5 times by 2 to give us 10 on the bottom, to give us 10 as the denominator. But we must remember to do exactly the same on the top. So we're going to do times by 2 on the bottom. We're then going to also times by 2 on the top. So 3 times 2, that will give us 6. So now we've got 6/10. Now, if you remember with the previous one, we said that 0.5 was the same as 5/10. So now we've got 6/10. So this is the same as 0.6 because we've put 6 in the tenths column. So this is the place value. We've got tenths column. We've got nothing in the units column because this is a smaller fraction. But we've got 6 in the tenths column. Okay, and this last one we've already got as a decimal, so we don't actually need to do anything with this. Now we can have a look at each of these and work out what order they go in from biggest to smallest. So we have got, if we're just focusing on the decimals, we've got 0.5, 0.666, 0.6, and 0.65. So if we're putting those in order, now it's reasonably simple for us to just look down and work out which one's the biggest and which one's the smallest. So we've got 0.5 here, which would be the smallest. So you can see in the tenths column, we've got the smallest number here. So this one will be 0.5. Then the next one, we've got 0.666, 0.65. This one is just 0.6. So if you remember, this will be the same as 0.60. So we've sort of got 60 after the decimal point. So this would be the next smallest. Now I've just started writing this as a decimal, but what we need to remember to do is actually write it as a fraction, because that's how they told us the answers. That's how they gave us the information. So we should carry on using the information in the same way that they've given us. So next we've either got 0.6666 or 0.65. So 0.65, we've got, if we're looking at the hundredths column, we've got 5 in the hundredths column, whereas this one's got a 6. So the next smallest one will be 0.65. And then lastly, the biggest one we've got here will be 0.66666 recurring, which is the same as 2/3. Okay, so a tricky little question there. This turning our fractions into decimals and decimals into fractions is really not an easy thing to be doing. So again, similar for the percentage one, I've posted a couple of ideas and different sort of worksheets and practice that you can do on my Twitter and my Instagram. So I suggest that you have a check those out if you're struggling with this sort of thing. Don't worry too much because it is a really hard topic. And if you are struggling, then I suggest you check back to this video and have a little look if you get a little bit stuck. Okay, so lastly, just thank you very much for watching. I've got a few more maths SATs videos coming out, KS2 SATs questions coming out. So it would be great if you could subscribe to the channel so you're the first ones to hear about any of the SATs questions coming.